Welcome back to another episode of How We Solve This. Today we are going to be talking about market research and how both James and I have integrated AI into our workflows to try and help us be more efficient. I think one of the interesting things when I talk to businesses a lot around data is they often have a lot of it, but it's the gaining of actionable insights that is a real challenge. One of the areas that I find fascinating is, particularly with quantitative market research, the as an industry, a lot of the techniques and the best practices were developed many years ago when technology was in a completely different place. The example I give is survey questions as an example. Historically you would ask a survey and you'd have closed responses, option A, B, C, D, or E. That was simply because it was easier to analyze, because you would draw quantifiable results by saying, 20% of people said answer E. Wonderful, there's my insight. But actually what I love now with the advent of AI is it's a great way of speeding up repetitive tasks. Like, it really is. And often, a lot of the time, when you say you survey 1,000 customers, 10,000 customers, you have to go through a pretty formulaic process to extract results from that. And that can be something that can be sped up significantly with AI, which is so beneficial for small businesses that maybe don't have an in-house data analysis team, or don't have the budget for comprehensive research. They may be debating, I've got 10,000 dirhams to spend. Do I spend that on customer research, or do I spend that on customer acquisition? And actually, what the AI has made this one quicker, but also more affordable. The example I give, and I find this one absolutely fascinating because it sort of changed the approach for a company that I was working with previously, was it was an app-based business, and when I joined, 80% of their installs were untracked. So they were making a big effort on marketing, on customer acquisition, but only 20% of those they could attribute to any particular marketing effort. The 80% were organic. So the problem we were trying to solve was we wanted to grow, we wanted to develop a growth strategy for the next stage of that company's growth. We didn't know what was already working. It was kind of this big mystery box, that old analogy of, 50% of my marketing budget is wasted, but the problem is I don't know which half. And again, we kind of talked about this in an earlier episode, but sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that are most often overlooked. So in this scenario, what we did is, during the onboarding journey, we asked one simple question: how did you learn of us? With an open-ended response. The reason we did this was because as a marketing team, we had a hypothesis. We knew which channels we were spending on, but what we wanted to try and find out was where we were acquiring people through methods or channels, channels that we weren't necessarily focusing on. How do we unlock new channels? So the historic way of doing that would have been, how did you learn of us? Here's your 4 or 5 options. But with a company that was across multiple countries, had 1 million weekly active users, trying to, distill what we were doing in marketing across 5 different options was just not going to be sustainable. So rather than restricting the user, we said, hey, write whatever you want in here. And then we used AI to extract themes from that free text response. So it was something that maybe we would have tried 10 years ago, and it would have been the most mind-numbingly dull task for someone to wander through all of that data and try and figure out themes. But with AI, a wonderful tool called Interpret, we're able to digest that information so quickly. And one of the fascinating things that came from this was 50% of the unknown podcasts came from existing user referral, despite there being no referral mechanism at all built into the app.
50% of the customer acquisition.
50% of the customer acquisition was from existing user referral.
Okay.
And 20% was from podcasts. Okay. So what was really fascinating about it was, at the time, the company wasn't spending any money on podcasts and had no referral mechanic to encourage or reward customers that did refer. So it really unlocked insights that we wouldn't have got otherwise, because at that time we weren't spending money on podcasts. So there's no way that we would have said, oh yeah, make podcasts one of the 5 options. So I just love it, because it really opens up. A lot of the time you give customers the opportunity to feedback, and they will tell you honestly what they think about the product, which can hit the ego hard a little bit sometimes if you do truly take the reins off and let them say what they want. But I think being able to understand that is so very important, and that's just one particular use case for me. And I know you had some other use cases, but I'm so excited about the possibility that AI brings in terms of just boring, monotonous tasks that actually can deliver a lot of value to your business if you can operationalize that process.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the challenges with data as a non sort of data person, and I know your core family is very data driven. If you're sort of talking about taking your business from 0 to 1, or you're in that stage of like startup, I've always seen data as like the financial services of marketing, in the sense of it's made to look complex, or is made to look like it's a lot tougher than what it probably actually is. Like things like, oh, suddenly I need a warehouse. Why do I need a warehouse? I'm joking, but like it's what do you actually need to do that? And I think for somebody like myself, like I know you can go into the weeds and build like these models and everything like that. For me, around the sort of maybe the storytelling or the community and elements like that, that's incredible that there's somebody like you to do that, because I then get in the weeds and like you can say, well, actually, James, do X, Y, Z. But I think if you're at that stage of like the 0 to 1, or you haven't got a U, what I find works, and I think what's amazing now is things like Claude, ChatGPT, or all the sort of whatever AI tool that you use. What I find amazing is, so you take the hotel in Sri Lanka that we spoke about in our first episode. What you can do with that now is, so instead of you just sort of shooting in the wind and saying, okay, how do I market this hotel? What you can do is you'd find 10 very similar hotels, for example, that are similar to your like, it's a boutique hotel, so you'd find other boutique hotels around the same price. Then what I would do is I would go onto all of the review sites, or not all, but probably the main ones. So wherever they're getting most of their bookings, probably TripAdvisor or Google reviews, and I would just screenshot, and I would probably do it across 5 or 10 hotels, and I would do it where I get the top ratings and the negative ratings, and I do that for 5. I put it into one Word document, upload it to Claude or whatever tool you use, and I would say, and then I just write a prompt. These are competitor hotels. What have their customers hated, and what have they loved, and how can we compete with these? What are the most used words? Because you'll find things like, so on the negative, it could be service. So we can be very heavily on that service. It might be things like ice bath has been said 10 times, and so suddenly, okay, we can spend $500 because we know that works. And I think there's a lot of stories to be told in small data. And I think that's the thing. I think people sort of look at it like data, like you've got to get in and you need a data scientist and you've got to rip it all apart. But I think you can be really creative in the sense of, actually uploading information that's on the internet. Like even things like when we were looking at Sri Lanka, you found the documents of where, the local tourism. Okay, great. Where are the tourists coming from? What sort of age groups? What are those people typically like? Why do they come to Sri Lanka? What are the most, what are the most visited places when they come here? And you can then sort of maybe target different things, because if you also know that they're moving around the island on a road trip, which we found out most people do, we can start targeting ads in other places, because we know that they're going to be looking at the next location because they book day by day. So I think it's just, I think people get scared by data, but there's ways to just really simply build your own sort of cases and understanding around small data. I think small data is overlooked.
I agree. And I think as well, like you mentioned it briefly earlier, but with Claude projects now, you can set up repeatable workflows. Like I remember, asking Claude to summarize the Sri Lankan national tourist data. we had insights in there around, the amount of different properties people stay in per trip. So I think it was like, on average, people stay 10 days, but they stay in 3 different locations. Yeah. So what then was also really interesting is joining that with our understanding of the sort of frame of time that people tend to book. Like I know we saw the differences in Booking.com of Booking.com tend to book early.
Yeah.
Airbnb tend to be, I need somewhere tomorrow night. Yeah. So, understanding that behavior of shifting locations was, not just, yes, we can advertise in country, but also, we understand that people are last minute in terms of their bookings and more fluid with their stay in terms of being, open to maybe staying a couple of nights or maybe extending or maybe moving on to the next place. And I think it's just, one of the ways I always like to approach this is the next best action. Do you have a data scientist? Often smaller businesses, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But as a founder or as a marketing leader in one of these businesses, you got to ask yourself, what can I do to make a small incremental improvement on what am I doing today?
Yeah.
And I think that leveraging that small data and multiple different data sources to give you a better understanding of the customer, be that your existing customers or the customers that you're yet to acquire, can be so valuable. Because going back to the sort of point we talked about, I think in episode 2, is that a lot of the time you don't have limitless pots of cash to throw at acquisition. So you've got to act with best intent and try and figure out quickly what is the route to capturing revenue. And I find it fascinating. Like you said, I sort of go off into the weeds and come back out with insights that'll really form the marketing strategy. But I think it's understanding that not there's varying skill levels, but also the varying amount of time to be able to do that. And this is where I think that particularly with the Claude projects is you have those sort of processes that you can automate that maybe saves you 2 hours. Find different data sources. Like tourism boards are brilliant. Like the amount of data they have is wonderful, but it's sometimes too much data.
Yeah.
You can't read through 17 30-page PDFs, but you can create a prompt that says digest this document and summarize the key points for me. Which I think just is that speed to insight that I find fascinating.
Do you know one thing? I think one thing you've got to be careful of, though, and I was just thinking this as you're speaking then, is on Airbnb and Booking.com more is it was telling us that 60 or 70% of people were booking in Sri Lanka, but it actually said they were Sri Lankan. Where we know they weren't Sri Lankan, they were just traveling around Sri Lanka. So I think one thing you've got to be careful with small data is look at, like, almost test that, like have a look at all of, like if you're attached to your CRM, whatever that is, like for us, we can see, well, actually, no, all of those guests were from Europe, for example. And I think you've just got to be maybe careful of when you're doing that is not just believing the first piece of data that comes out. Keep pushing that and pushing it until you actually get an answer. And I think that then goes also into your socials. Once you've got that data and you understand who your core market is, the type of marketing they like, this type of stories they like, the visuals, etc. Test it. If it doesn't work, remove. And then you try different ads. And we can go into that in more detail in another episode.
Absolutely.
But I just think like you said, Claude projects and things like that. Like just build a project, upload all the information, and then you're continuously using that. And maybe we do a session on Claude or ChatGPT, not to be biased, but
other LLMs are available.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I've got friends who are building like stuff just on direct LLMs, and they're getting better results because it's not sort of gate kept or. But yeah, so on data, I think just to summarize from my perspective is this: the small data is key. Is find look if you just think in that way of what information do I need to market this, or what information is out there that will give me a better understanding of my core market.
Absolutely.
And then put it into Claude, and then just ask a million questions, and just you'll find out so much about your core market. How do I market to these people, etc., etc. And it does that for you. It's almost like having it's your marketing assistant with you, basically.
Absolutely. And I think that's the really key thing for me is how can you better understand your customers? How can you form hypotheses? How can you continually ask questions? How can you continually iterate on that and be open to adapting your approach if a new piece of data comes in that helps you better understand those customers.